Okay, thank you. I wanted to ask a little bit about maybe some of your sound settings,
Oh, okay.
because I'm not 100% sure that I'm getting the best quality that you have. Um, do you have the original sound thing turned on, or do you know what I'm talking about with that?
Original sound thing.
Yeah, if you go into your sound settings, like
Yeah.
if you click the little caret beside the mute button and then do audio settings, um, under the advanced audio settings, there should be a thing that says show in meeting option to enable original sound.
Yeah, that's clicked right
That
now.
is checked. Okay. So then back on the screen where you see me up at the top left, hopefully you see something that says turn on original sound.
Yeah.
And if you do that, that will probably help us.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
Also, under those advanced audio settings, we want to disable where it says suppress persistent background noises and or intermittent background noises, because sometimes when you're playing a long note, Zoom thinks it's like a lawnmower going by and can distort that a little bit.
Yeah.
It just seems like it's overloading just a little bit.
Okay.
Um, because I want to get a good idea of because I think you sound really good. I want to make sure I get the very best sound. So let's try. Can I hear you play just the beginning again? I want to work on these scales that lead up to the opening statement.
Sure.
Yeah. So one of the dangers of this, that particular phrase is, of course, the notes have to have some space in between them, and we want them to be nice and bouncy, but they also have to have some sort of line, right? Because I always talk about with my students, we have to think about what the function of the line is. Um, yeah, Megan says that sounded better. It definitely sounded better over here too.
Oh, yeah.
Um, uh, we have to always think about what's the function, right? What is the composer doing with this line? And the whole point of those little scales are to build tension and build energy up to the main part of the excerpt, so to speak, right? So I want to be able to hear that each note leads to the next, even though it doesn't get to touch the next note, right? Because if we wanted to make it lead, our natural instinct would be just make the notes touch, and then we go do 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 do. But obviously, stylistically, it makes no sense to do that. But we still need to feel that one note naturally is the next. Boom, 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 boom. Right, that each one builds a little bit more energy than the one before. Can we just try that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a little hard to tell from this end, but I think maybe you could start a little bit softer
Okay.
and just give yourself a little bit more room to grow. The other thing is you're feeling the time very well, but a very common thing on this is to take like these really short breaths on the downbeat. We kind of go like bum 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 bum, right? And it's working okay. I just wanted to say like you don't have to do that either, right?
Right.
Boom 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 boom, right? If you want to energize the breath, okay, cool. It feels a little like it feels a little gaspy,
Mm.
you know. Maybe let's try it one more time, and remember that even in short notes, we're still singing. Good, let's keep going. Okay, good. Let's talk about the main part of the excerpt. We have all of these scale patterns, right? We have la da 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 dum da dum da 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 da, right? And we do that three times, right? So we have a sequence that's a sequence of three threes, right? So we go ya da 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 dum, and then we do it again. Da da dum da dum da dum. And then we do it again. Da da dum da dum da dum. And what's tricky about that, what's really interesting, is Berlioz has the line first going up and then down, but then the sequence only goes down, right? Each time you do it, um, typically for a composer, especially of that era, writing sequences, writing repetitive patterns like that was shorthand for this needs to grow. It needs to develop, right? You would never say the same kind of phrase exactly the same way three times, but then he makes it more difficult by the fact that each phrase gets a little bit lower in the range, and so you have to work almost harder to get that energy to build. So what I would love, typically it's like, yeah, this needs to be forte. It's an exciting moment in the piece, but I make sure that I get to that boom 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 boom, like that's a big moment, and then I might back off like 5% and do like forte minus, almost imperceptible, right? um, just to give myself a little bit of room to grow. So I kind of go forte minus da da dum ba bum ba bum ba 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 bum bum. Then really forte ya da dum dee dee da 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 dum dum. Then forte plus ya da dum da dum. Right. That third iteration, I think, has to be the most energetic of the three.
Right, right.
Sense?
Yeah, do you mean back off like within the whole note? Like hit it and then back off?
Actually, not the whole note, but after the whole note. So I'll let
Okay.
the whole note be a nice arrival point. Bum 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 bum. Right? You know, just again because at that point, then it's three trombones in unison. You're gonna be heard. Like it's you're not gonna get swallowed at that point. Now, obviously, it has to be subtle. It has to be just enough that it doesn't grab our attention as a subito dynamic change. We're just talking about backing, just taking the edge off so that it seems like you're full out, but there's another gear that you have there, right?
Yeah.
And that, because that to me, when I listen to this excerpt, what really gets me excited is that sort of, it's not quite contrary motion exactly, but the fact that the energy is going up even though the line and the sequence is going down. That can be very exciting, right? And it's such a low brassy kind of thing to have, right? um, and what I love when I hear somebody play this is it's like it really sounds like they're full out, but then they still keep finding ways to turn up the energy without going like, without losing their sound and going full Wagnerian. This is still Berlioz, right? Like this is not, marching band, right, so to speak. That's, at least in America, that's our metaphor for like really brassy, kind of out of control sounds. We call it marching band or drum corps, right? But does that make sense?
Yeah, it really does. Yeah.
Can we try just one more thing just with your setup there? Could we maybe move the mic either a little further to your left so it's not directly in front of the bell, or a little further away?
Yeah.
I think we might just be overloading your mic.
I'll do both.
Bass
Further
trombone is
away and to the
powerful.
left. Okay. Hopefully that's better.
Yeah, cool.
And I'll sit back further too.
Okay.
Cover all my bases.
Because I had this mic that I have for the first little while. I was just too close to it, and it was just like it's so much sound and such an intense sound coming out of the bass trombone. It's causing, I think, the housing of the mic to just kind of like vibrate and overload it a little bit. Okay, so let's try that. Let's go all the way from the beginning of the excerpt, and again, I want us to think in terms of energy, right? So we start very small and then build up. Boom, 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 boom. The energy's waiting to get out. Boom, 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 dum, dum, da-da-ga-dum, da-da-dum, da-da-dum, bum, 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 bum. Here we are, and now we still have to build the energy over that sequence. Let's try it.
Okay.
Yeah, and a good finish to that excerpt as well. I'm usually kind of annoyed by how people finish this, because it's sort of like I'm past all the hard parts, so I'll go dum 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 bum bim bum. It's like, okay, I'm a timpani again, right? But you're really taking the energy all the way to the end of the excerpt, which I appreciate. I think you could maybe smack those syncopations just a little bit more. Bum 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 bum. What give those the weight that we want is not just like it's not like articulating them harder or playing them louder. There is some of that, but also how the half notes on that offbeat relate to the downbeats that you've just played. Right? If you go da 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 da, right, you don't get the impact from the syncopation. Part of the syncopation impact comes from how you treat the note before it by just the slightest bit of lift. Yum bum 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 bum. Right? It's that short, long, short, short, long, short. Right? That kind of all of this is relative. We don't want nothing's like super short, but does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think you could lift those quarter notes just a little bit because if we think about what a syncopation really is, it's it's a strong beat with a downbeat in the wrong place, right? And that's
Yeah.
what makes it energetic. Bum, 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 right? And then we bring it back to the downbeat. Boom, beam, boom, beam, boom. I think those are perfect as they are. Intonation is very, very good. Again, so we've just had this stair step sequence where we go down, right, and then we go the opposite way. Yum da da dum da da dum 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 yum da da dum da da dum 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 yum da da dum da da dum. He ups the ante even more by having a sequence of three and then interrupting the third sequence by another again a little unexpected twist there. So again, you have to have enough in the reserves that you can keep that energy building, right? I, my students get tired of me talking about energy in this excerpt but that's really Berlioz's primary currency in this. Um, there's some fun in the scale, okay? There's some fun in the syncopations, but what really brings the energy to this are the sequences and how it builds tension. Um, noticing ever so subtly, if I can be picky,
Yeah.
ever so subtly in the opening scales, we're just a little bit changing the note length as you get louder towards the end. We start out with boom, 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 which is great, and then we start a few more notes like that. Boom, 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 boom. I'm over exaggerating, but those last two or three notes are getting significantly longer, right? I think don't be afraid um, to keep the lift there and make it match because it can be very confusing to a listener when you've told me, these notes are going to be this length or this shape, right? And then we change them and we're not sure why, right? Now, if you have a
Okay.
reason why, great, great. It doesn't have to be so cut and dry, but in this case, I'm not sure what the musical reason would be to change the note length, right? So I would love it's interesting because this is one of those things that a lot of people do. I've probably noticed that little tendency with so many people, both bass and tenor. They'll go boom, 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 boom. These beautiful little balls of sound. And then they go boom, 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 boom. Right, and it gets really kind of like ringy at the top. I know we don't want to be pecky and too short, but I think just keep that beautiful little ball of sound all the way up to the top.
Okay.
Um, so I want to look at that, and then I want to again make sure that each sequence builds in energy both as the sequence goes down and then as the chromatic sequence goes up.
Okay.
Start one more time.
Yep.
Yeah, I quite liked that. The beginning was so much more consistent. The syncopations, yeah, that's it. That's totally exact. I mean, it's just, it seems like such this boring little bland moment of the excerpt, but there's a lot of energy that's potentially there. The chromaticisms went really well. The very last one, maybe we had a little bit of a pitch discrepancy. That's a tough one. E flat to D to E to D flat. I think
Yeah.
you played on the same overtone the whole time, right? You're using D in fourth. Yeah. Make sure that you're doing a great job of getting out to fourth position or a long fourth position for that D. Then make sure we get back to second for the E natural, right? There's just a little bit of like bum 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 bum, right? So make sure we get bum 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 bum. I'm not singing the right pitches, but you get the idea. Um, one more little picky thing,
Great.
because you sound beautiful and make a great sound, and you're very very consistent. Um, the rhythm of yata dee ba bum ba bum ba 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 bum. Every now and then it feels like maybe one of the eighth notes gets just a little mushy, right? It has to be right in that slot of yatata papa papa papa, right? And every now and then maybe one of them goes like yata dee da dum da dum da. I'm over exaggerating so you can hear it, but it almost gets like a little duply or a little, I don't know, it's hard to describe. Sometimes that eighth note is not always in the pocket,
Okay.
right? Usually is, and so it sticks out when it's not in the pocket, right? So I think again the rhythmic energy and keeping it right in the pocket. You got to feel those downbeats and then react right in the pocket. Can we just start right on the main part of the excerpt on da da dee da dum dee dee, and I think keep those eighth notes going through ya da dee da 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 da. Yeah. So I think it's the second time. It's the second part of the sequence. We go yeah. With the one where we start on F. Da da dee da dum da dum. It's the one where you go to the trigger. Bit da da dum da 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 dum.
Okay.
Flat A, B flat. I know that's super awkward. It's got to be. We have to keep the energy there, and that also has to be right in time. It's getting just ever so slightly outside the groove for you there, or it could just be that Zoom is changing, which that happens from time to time. It kind of speeds up and slows down a little bit, but I've heard it consistently enough that I think you might be getting just out of time there because of the awkward moving from fourth to first on the trigger. Making sure that the slide and trigger are well coordinated and right in the slot. Can we just try that once more, that part of the excerpt?
Just at the F or from the first sequence?
Actually, let's isolate just the one starting on the F. Yeah. When I practice this excerpt, that is the place in each of those sequences that I have to work on. I call it the turnaround. where you've been going down the scale and then you go bit, bum, 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 and start going back the other way. That's where I have to really work on my time and my intonation and my articulation, right? I'm happy to go la ta 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 tom ta tom fa 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 bum, but right, that always happens to me. So that's not happening to you, judging on what I'm hearing now. But just ever so slightly there, it got a little bit out of time compared to the rest of your excerpt. Great. Um, let's do the ride.
Okay. I kind of prepared like the whole first section with the minor and the major, and then the second major. Is that
Great. Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much. Beautifully done overall. I have very little to criticize with this. Um, I think a lot of people get in their own heads about this excerpt because there are legitimately a lot of ways you can mess it up.
yeah?
Are, and I've stepped in every single one of them before. You're not doing the vast majority of those things. Like you're doing really really well with this. Just a couple little tweaks. The first one being your pickups are really good. Your placement of the dotted rhythm is very very good. Every now and then, um, it sounds like there's a little bit of a softening of the third note of each measure. So what I mean is when you go dum dum dum, that note has to be nice and crisp and clear as well. But the problem is it typically it comes right after a 16th note, and some of those slide patterns are very awkward, right?
Wait, which? Sorry, I'm confused about which note you're talking about in the
The
pattern.
third note of the pattern, bum bum bum, like
Oh,
the third subdivision of the first beat. Um, the you're placing it in the right place. I want to be really clear about that because that's typically the issue with this is people don't play the second and third note in the proper place rhythmically. But it's right there, dum da dum dum da dum dum. It's right there for you, which is good. I'm just noticing that it seems a little bit softer, perhaps, in the articulation. This is something that I've developed a little bit of an allergy to just because of my experience in the Vienna Philharmonic, because clarity is such a huge issue for them there. Um, Canadians have the same thing that Americans have in their speech patterns in many ways, which is that we very often will turn T sounds like into D sounds like duh. Anywhere else in the world, um, I don't have my visual aid here, but anywhere else in the world, it's called a bottle of water. But in the US and Canada, we call it a bottle of water, right? Now, that may be a little different across Canada. I don't know if that is universally true, but at least in the Canadians that I know, it's still a bottle of water. That is a D sound. That's not a T sound. And we say legato and staccato and spaghetti instead of legato and staccato and spaghetti, right? Only Fraser Crane talks that way, right? Yeah, Megan says, nope, we all do it here too.
I haven't met somebody that says bottle, so
Right. Nobody says it's a bottle of water, right? But I mean, you go to England, that's the way they talk, or you Australia. I mean, basically anywhere else in the world, it's a bottle of water, and
yeah.
we so to our ears, from the moment we're immersed in our North American culture, to our ears, T sounds and D sounds are almost interchangeable, right? It still registers in our brain as a T, even though what we've actually heard is a D, right? I had to learn this in a hard way. My first concert with the Vienna Philharmonic was Mahler's First Symphony, and we were doing this bit in the fourth movement where the brass have this lick that goes bum 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 bum, right? So bum bum dum dee bum 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 bim da da dum, but right, and so the trombones have. I changed my mic here so you can hear this, but so the trombones have right, and we do that a lot, right? Dum 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 ding da da dum. And we were playing through in the rehearsal, and the principal trumpet player leans down to me and he goes, ta 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 ta. And I was like, okay, what is he talking about? So then we did it again, and I went, and he was like, ta 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 ta. And I was like, is this a Laurel and Hardy routine? Like, am I on it? Are they like, are they? Is it because I'm the new kid and I'm an American? And I got so upset that I went home and I'm like, what's the problem? And I recorded myself playing it, and I realized that ever so subtly, I was going ta 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 da,
Oh,
because it's a fast note where you leap up an overtone, and of course that's one of those notes that if you miss it, you're really gonna miss it, you know. Um, and it looks like Micah's phone. Sorry, you
is
see
that there?
that? A great ceiling there. So that's one of those notes that if you miss it, I mean, it's going to be obvious that you've missed it. And so in order to make sure that I didn't miss it, I backed off the articulation just a little bit, and I thought nothing of it because bottle of water, right?
Right.
um, but the principal trumpet player, who by the way was three seats down because he was using an assistant, and so was the principal trombone. Um, he heard that through all of the craziness of Mahler's First Symphony. He heard me going ta 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 da, right?
Wow.
And so to me, it felt like saying bottle of water when I finally went right. That feels weird to put that level of ping on it when it goes that fast. Very similarly, it feels weird to a lot of people to put that amount of ping on the Ride of the Valkyries. Again, because thank you, Megan. Again, because it's so fast. It goes by so fast, and typically the slide pattern is really weird. So we will very, very often we'll go ta 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 da, right? Ta 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 da ta 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 da ta, right? Um, to to anybody who speaks German, that would seem really a weird way to play it, right? And it ever so subtly softens that third note. Now, you may or may not want to you may or may not be concerned with how you might be viewed in a German-speaking country. You may be wanting to get a job in Canada or the States or something, where that slight softening of the note wouldn't be such a huge issue, but I think it takes away some of the crispness and energy that the excerpt can have. So that was my first thing. It's just every now and then, it's typically whenever there's an awkward slide or valve change involved, like when you have to go dum da dum, really really quickly. We'll just slightly soften that. So for me to get used to doing that, I just take out the 16th note and just get really used to really pinging those eighth notes. Boom, 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 and just getting those to be just as clear as I want. And if I'm used to hearing it that way, then putting that 16th note in there, back in there, hopefully my ear will want to continue to hear it with that amount of clarity and clarity and crispness, right? We do it all the time, right? It's no big deal to us. So that was thing number one. Thing number two, I'm going to reference the the sheet music that Megan sent. Thank you for doing that, Megan. Um, and just making sure that we're looking on the same music here. Right, I'm guessing we're down here. W for Wagner. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, that's what I thought. So when we go dum dum da dum da, and then you have a rest.
Yeah.
Notice that that dotted quarter is tied to an eighth. And I, for many, many years, because I'm used to playing in jazz band, I would interpret that as basically cut off on big beat three. So yum dum da dum da off, right? Unfortunately, that's not what Wagner means by that. What Wagner means by that is hold through to beat three, cut off after beat three has already happened. We have to let that note get all the way into the space of beat three. Bum bum da dum da, bum bum da dum da, bum bum. Right? You don't have to do it back to back that many times. But even when you're going into a rest, make sure that it's bum bum da dum da, that you don't cut off until we've had beat three.
Okay.
Um, Besides that, I think you're doing this beautifully. Great sound. You're navigating the crazy intonation challenges that are this key or these keys, and you're doing a really good job with it. So typically it's like, the dotted rhythm's wrong. People are dupling the pickup, or they're just playing way out of tune, and none of those things are true for you. So really, it's just like the clarity on all those notes, you know, and then holding through that note that's tied. Do you want to play it again?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Great. Sorry, I talk a lot. Like drinking from a fire hose.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for holding those ties. Once you notice it, then it's hard to unhear it, right? It's like oh yeah, hold those ties. I got to really hold them over to the next beat. The one it gets difficult is when you have to hold it over into beat three, big beat three, but then you have an eighth note to breathe, and then you got to get right back in for the next pickup, right?
Yeah.
Dum dee, bum bum dum dee, right? That can be one of the most like athletic moments of the excerpt, just because you just don't have a lot of time, but you're not really allowed to like chop beat three. Again, that's one of those high level things that probably 98% of people that I hear playing this excerpt, they do that. They chop that note right on beat three because it's like I gotta breathe. But then, I'm behind the curtain at an audition with the Vienna Philharmonic, and they're all the string players and the wind players and whatever are like, why did they just chop that note? It's like, it's a good question. I mean, I guess we got to breathe, but they see that note tied over, and they would keep that bow going.
Yeah.
Um, so I thought that was really well done. The only other things that I would suggest, just some different ways to practice it, because I always want to have there's like the ideal, how I want to play the excerpt, the tempo I think it should go, the volume it should be at, all of that kind of stuff. But then I also have to be prepared. I call it the 2 degrees rule, or the two notches rule, where I want me and all of my students to be able to play it, 2 notches faster, 2 notches slower, right? A little bit louder, a little bit softer, a little bit clearer, a little bit less clear. I don't know who's going to ask for it to be less clear, but I want to be able to do all of that, because sure enough, you'll get into an audition, and you'll play it, exactly how you want to play it, and then it's like, could you play that, louder? Part of it is they may or may not think it needs to be louder, but they want to see if you can and if you can change. There were
Right.
2 excerpts in my audition in Vienna that they asked me to play it more aggressively. I asked afterwards, like, so, if it comes up in the orchestra, should I just start at the more aggressively thing? He's like, oh, no, no, no. Just do what the conductor wants you to do. We just wanted to see if you would or could. We wanted to see if you could, make it more aggressive. Would you be able to change, and would you be willing to change? So I think you could practice, especially the minor version. Tradition is that is a little bit faster, and that the minor version's a little bit slower. Um, some people say that programmatically, that's when the Valkyren have now come down to the battlefield. They're now taking the wounded soldiers onto their horseback, and so when they rode into the scene, they didn't have anything on their horses. But now that they're riding out of the scene, they now have wounded and dead soldiers on their horses, taking them to Valhalla, so it's heavier. I think it's just because the tuba enters. uh, no offense, tuba player. Um, but typically that's a little bit slower compared to the minor version when we get to the major version. So maybe practice it a little bit faster. I don't know that it would necessarily need to go any slower, but practice it even a little bit slower. Um, again, it's hard to tell over Zoom, but I think maybe there could be a little bit more difference between fortissimo and forte. Most likely, you were making that difference, and it's just hard to tell because of because of Zoom. But be aware of that. Um, and that's the comments that I have. I think you're sounding really good on both of these.
Thank you, thank you. That's great.
Yeah. Do you
Great
have any
stuff.
questions or anything you didn't understand?
Um, I don't think so. Nothing comes to mind. It was very clear and very good advice.
Okay, good, good. All right, good. So maybe time for the next person.
Sure. I guess Andrea, do you want to go next? I think you're muted, Andrea.
Oh,
Oh,
am I
wait,
muted or?
there you go.
Oh,
There we
okay.
go.
I just I want to make sure I'm not stepping on Micah's toes. Which ones are you doing, Micah?
I was thinking I would do Mahler 3 and Stefan Fantastique.
Okay, I can do.
Not if there was time, Till, but if you want to take Till, it's fine.
Okay,
Uh,
You know,
I can
you
do.
can both do the same ones.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
It's okay.
yeah, I could do like Tail and La Gazaladra. I don't have. Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, let's do that.
Whatever you'd like to play.
Okay, that sounds good.
All right, thank you. Cool. I love this excerpt. I love this piece. Good. So right at the beginning, um, I would love for there to be a little bit more difference between the short and the long, right?
Okay.
Because I mean, part of this is supposed to be just a little bit humorous. Right? I mean, obviously, this is Till Eulenspiegel's lustige Streiche, merry pranks, right? It's there's a little bit of cheekiness to this whole thing, right? Right? And I want just a little bit more mischief in each of those groups of three eighth notes that comes along. Again, as I was saying to Nat, sequences are obviously composers use those for building energy usually and going places and developing something. So we need the energy to grow, and we need the volume to grow, and maybe the emphasis on the articulation to grow. But essentially, the notes are the same shape, right? Once we start with da 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 dum da 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 dum da 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 dum da 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 dum, right? That they're basically the same. They just grow, and of course, the notes are different, right? Can we just try to really get that to be consistent right at the beginning? Really think about before you play, even really formulate what's that going to sound like. My teacher Vern always told me uh, you play two trombones at any given time. You play the trombone that's in your hands and the trombone that's in your head. um, there's in your head there's this, the perfect trombone player, right, that you want to sound like. And so really formulating that, and really hear that a couple times before you launch into play. Can we just play that first, just that opening statement up to 36? Yeah, I think, can we be even more energetic, especially the last one? Because it's funny because he says my least favorite expressive marking in all of music is cresc period, um, because it's so easy to overlook. But we do have that we're supposed to crescendo, but then there's an extra little crescendo into right. That's the place where it really flowers. So I would love to hear a little bit extra one there. Yes, thank you. Now, um, I think, can I try an experiment?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. um, I want to do this slurred. I've never actually tried this, but I want to try something. But can you do it very smooth and slurred? You're not allowed to use really articulation. I want you to get it as clean as you can, just with your slide technique. Dee, 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 da, 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 da.
Do you still want me to like tongue or just no tongue?
I think like either no or very little tongue.
Okay.
Good.
Sorry, the second one.
Yeah, no, but you're noticing like it's really, we're not getting a clear separation of the notes. What I'm trying to get you to do, or what I want to do, is show you how you can actually get it probably 70% of the way to clarity just with really good slide technique.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think we might be relying just a little too much on your tongue to achieve clarity, when I think actually, the slide has got to be there. Right. Um, for years and years and years, I was trying to achieve 100% of my clarity with just my tongue, and so I would just tongue the crap out of everything, you know. And when my teacher finally said, you could use a lot less articulation if you had really good slide technique, you know. um, and so that, I think you could, I think that's where you're at right now with this particular section of the excerpt, and maybe in the crazy lick too, because what makes it so difficult for trombonists is chromaticism. We actually would much rather play diatonic scales, or even just like random intervals, than chromatics. um, because playing, all those little tiny movements, it really gets old. Um, and this excerpt, of course, is full of chromatics. So, in those chromaticisms, use the most efficient slide technique that you can use. Only move when the note is supposed to happen, not before and not after. Can we just can we, I still want to try it. Just it may take two or three or four times. Just still very quite legato, and I really just want you to concentrate on getting it as clear as you can with just the slide technique, please.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just adding length. Yeah, that's not what you're asking. Sorry.
It's okay. Let's try it a few times. Let's
Yeah.
try it a few times. I know this is really weird what I'm asking you to do, but what we're going to do is we're all going to hear you learning. It's going to be fascinating. Good. One more time. Oh, just that last lick, just getting from the D to the D sharp.
Sorry.
Yes. Good. I love that. Let's do it one more time just to ingrain it. So, what we're hearing on our end, those of us over here just listening to you, we're hearing that you're getting a good bit of the way towards clarity just with having really efficient slide technique. But can you guys also hear her lines getting better, right? We're hearing la da da dee, da 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 da. Right, we're blowing through more. Now, the amazing part, the mind blowing part, is going to be now bring the articulation back, still have that same wonderful slide technique and that same direction of air, but we're going to bring that last little bit of clarity through the articulation. Do, 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 dee, 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 dee.
Sorry.
Excellent. Yeah. How did you feel about that?
It's better. It's better. I am tempted to like slip into old habits when I start. I notice, but yeah, it's
Yeah,
better.
sure. So, if you find that effective, if you feel like that, trying to get the slide technique to be a little clearer helps the clarity and the line, then just go back and forth. So, in a master class, typically it's like we'll introduce something and then we're on to the next thing. But in your practice session, if you were just to go, and what I have done with this very excerpt is go back and forth between actually just not using articulation either at all or very little, and trying to achieve as much clarity as I can with the slide and the air, and then alternate back and forth between as written and more legato. And what we want, the way we acquire neuromuscular motor skills is we bring we can bring two things very close together, two dots very close together, and then our brain will have no choice but to go, oh, these two things are related. I will connect them, right? And when we go back and forth like that, that really helps our brain understand the issue. Like, oh, I see you're trying to get this thing that you're doing over here to also mirror this thing that you're doing over here. And so, but just in that, 2 minute little exercise, it got clearer and much more natural sounding, right? Now, let's talk about 36. Dum, boom, dum. We really need those little fanfares to really pop out, right, out of the texture. There's a lot going on here. Any Richard Strauss piece, there's going to be a lot going on all the time. It's very thickly orchestrated. So in order to get something like that to really pop out of the texture, I call that a Death Star moment. Anybody ever heard of Star Wars? Yeah. Okay. We have a few nods. Okay. So, spoiler alert. I'm going to spoil the end of Star Wars if you've never seen it. So, at the end of Star Wars, there's this thing called the Death Star that explodes, right? And what's if you watch that movie, about just a split second before the Death Star explodes, the sound engineer took all the sound out of the movie just before the explosion happens in order to make the explosion that much more impactful. So there's like music and pew pew pew, right? And all of a sudden the sound goes out, and then what comes after the silence really pops, right? And so I tell my students it's a Death Star moment. So basically, after the long note, just the slightest lift, so that you can so that you can really spit that out and have it be really, really clear. Um, let's try all the way from the beginning and see if we can apply that. And again, in your mind's ear, so to speak, really think about how you want those first licks to sound. Yeah, and those last accents, where you have the D, E flat, E natural accented. Make sure that each of those ding dum dum dum, right? We can't give up on the energy there. Um, did that feel clearer where you were? It felt clearer on this side. The
Yeah, I think there was a couple that I cut off like a little too early, I think, but by the
yeah.
end of it, I think I found the happy medium.
Yeah, I think just finding the balance of that right there, because yeah, you can certainly, overdo it and go "Ba-da-da-dum, dee, da-da-da-da-da," where there's too much space, right? But just getting used to that, "Da-da-da-da-da-dum," so that it really spits out, just because it's so easy for that to get lost. Um, also, keep in mind when you're doing this for an audition, especially, we come up to 36 at fortissimo. We do the first one fortissimo, and then we have to make some sort of difference for forte, um, some discernible difference. It's a little hard to tell over Zoom. Now let's do the lick, right? Right? Do you know the German there? Immer ausgelassener und lebhafter. Do you know what that
I
means?
should.
Yeah. So first rule of thumb for any excerpt, right? If there's any language in there that you don't understand, translate it immediately and write it in. But basically, it's like, um, always more lively, kind of, is a good way to translate it, right? It has unbelievable, relentless energy, right? And so, yeah, let's hear you play. You want to just start right on that?
Sure. Sorry.
Cool. I'm not super convinced that when you're starting this, that you're really centering your focus, right, and getting that lick in, right. I think, especially with excerpts, that's going to be super, super important, right? Take an extra 3 seconds to really think about what's that going to sound like. Count yourself in. Or when I'm about to practice this lick, I always think about, when I'm saying lick. Does that make sense to you guys? Do you say lick
Yeah.
or phrase? Okay, I didn't
Yeah,
know
yeah.
slang was different here or there. But yeah, when I'm getting ready to play that, I think about the orchestra going right. Just taking that extra couple of seconds to really center, really focus. Some of you may have seen some of my teaching videos on a series that I call Body, Mind, and Spirit, where I have this method that I espouse, where especially during an orchestra excerpt kind of thing or during an audition, I tell people that, first relax the body, focus and center the mind on the task at hand, and then engage the spirit. What I mean by that is obviously prepare your body to play, focus on what you're about to do, and then get into character. Right, this is the character of Till Eulenspiegel. Right, and Ian Bousfield, my great friend and mentor, says there's no such thing as musicality. There's only character acting. Right, there's inhabiting a character, and so um, especially when practicing excerpts, I think that the focusing part of it and the character part of it are so important, because when we're going through an audition, we're typically asked to change from character to character to character, in 15 seconds. We have to go from Wagner to Strauss to Mozart to Hindemith, and no actor is asked to do that, right? A few of the greats could, Robin Williams could do that, right? Could just switch characters like that, or a great improv comic or something. But you have to be able to shift that. So um, most of my students, when they come to me, I'm like, all right, play that for me. They're like, okay, cool. Da, 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 da. And I'm like, well, okay, just like take 3 seconds, really think about what you want to do, what you want to sound like. It's because I'm not going to really get an accurate picture of how you're going to play this, if it's a little bit like shooting from the hip, right? So I think just we have all the time in the world. Really, really show me, this lick.
Oh, sorry. I'm like really nervous.
It's
Sorry.
okay. Hey, it's okay. It just means you care, right? It
Yeah.
means you want to sound good and you care about the music, and right. We've all been there. This is particularly why this process is really important, right? So that you have a chance to um, basically, whenever I do this process, whenever I sort of like center my mind and really focus on the task at hand, whoever's listening to me just disappears, and that's really what we want. Is there's no more masterclass, there's no more me or your peers, right? It's just you and the music, right? So I tell my students, whenever you start to play something, you're joining a recording already in progress, right? So you have Till Eulenspiegel in your head, so dum 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 dee, ba-dum, ba-dum, da 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 da, right? It's okay. You're in a safe place, and if you totally bomb, there are no negative consequences. There are none. Yeah, there we go. I'm hearing much more now, kind of the where this is, and I really think that it's the same exact issue we talked about at the beginning, where the clarity is actually going to come from the slide, not from the tongue. Another thing that's always intimidating to me about this excerpt is I look at this as like it's very easy for me to see this as a stretch of just an unending stretch of eighth notes. And so for me, sometimes to split it up into bits, right? So I'll just practice the beginning part, just practice getting into the excerpt and into the first full measure. Clearly, I'm not doing that well, but right, and just do that over and over. Just practice getting that much, right, and then start there. And just practice each little snippet. Especially we get to 37. I would practice, and really get good at that. right? It's the little tilt Eulenspiegel lick. Right, and I would almost like string the whole lick together that way, like 6 or 7 notes at a time, you know. And my peers would always get weirded out. They're like, "Why are you practicing till Eulenspiegel that way?" And I'm like, "Because I need my brain and my body to understand that this is not one run-on sentence of just like seemingly random notes. That there is actually a method to the madness." Because I'd be in the practice going, da 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 dum, da 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 dum, da 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 dum, da 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 dum, da 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 dum, right? Because if I get really good at that, and each one of those little snippets is like I'm able to do it perfectly and do it easily, then it becomes again much easier for my brain to see those dots and connect them. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So I think you could a uh, work on this a little bit in terms of slide technique, and b uh, cut it into smaller, manageable bits. Okay? The good part about it is your time is very good when you're going, especially there when you go to the end. Right, you're right in time there. Let's talk about the last bit. Bum 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 beam ba. Could I just hear that bit from there to the end? Yeah, I would love to hear in the last couple of measures. I don't see any reason to lift the F sharp. I would love to hear bum dee dum,
Mhm.
right? Because the whole vibe of this particular phrase is much more singing. Beam bum bum beam da da dum. Make sure that we get off of that tied D in time. We're losing just a little bit of time there. We're kind of going dum 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 beam da da dum dum. Right, it slows down just ever so slightly there. So keep the groove going. D ba da 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 dum D da dum D. Again, tons of energy here. Immer ausgelassener und lebhafter. Energy, energy, energy. Let's try it one more time. Really stay in time and keep singing, please.
Sorry.
All right.
Ah.
Yeah, I think part of the reason for that G might be that it's ever so slightly low.
Okay.
Um, it's just a hunch because for me, for most of my college career and even into graduate school, if I was going to miss one note on the trombone, it was going to be that G, and I never could figure out why. I just thought it was my trombone. I thought at the time I played a Bach, and I was like, it just must not have the G on it, you know. And my teacher finally said, I think that you're playing the G in like a regular second position and then just lipping it up rather than actually putting it where it goes, right? Um, and when I actually started putting, whenever that happens, if you're playing the G too low on the slide and then just lipping it up, you're going to get some and you're going to miss others. So I just in seeing your slide, it looked like the G might have been a little low on the slide. If you'll bring it up and then just play right in the center of the note, maybe that will help. Can we just try it one more time? I'm liking that a lot better already. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, don't be afraid to just really smack that last note. It's a really surprising note, right? This whole thing has been going dee dum bum. Nobody expects a C natural there, and it's very loud. It's a big moment. Um, that's already much better in time, and much more consistent with the G's and F sharps. Yeah, I think I think you understand what to work on this one. Okay, good. Did you want? You said you wanted to do La Gaza or La Forza?
La Gaza.
La Gaza. Let's do it. Excellent. I wasn't sure if you wanted to do more of them.
It's fine.
Okay, yeah, good. Um, Very well done. I really like, especially at the beginning, you're doing something that I can never do, which is you're really taking the line down to that beat. Bum, bum, ba, da, 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 dum. Really beautiful drive through there. So I have very little to say about this one. Mainly my complaints, so to speak, are when we get to the end and we get to the boring part. Bum, 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 beam, bum, bum, beam, bum, beam. To me, it tends to lose a little bit of energy there. The hard part about that is those notes can't be short, but they can't really be long either, right? We can't go ba 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 ba, right? But we also can't go ha ba 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 ba. I think they need to be somewhere in between. I start to think about either like a timpani or like a very like a double bass, boom boom bing bing boom bing, like a pizzicato double bass, where it's these beautiful round kind of notes that have some lift and some daylight in between, but are still ringing. They're not super short, not super long. I think yours were maybe a bit short. Um, I think let's start at is it what? Let's start at 128. We're on the D arpeggio. Bum 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 ba da 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 bum bum bim 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 bim. Yeah, I like that a lot better. I think also really great syncopations because we have this 1 3 1 3 1 3 1 2, right? It's a surprise, and anytime a composer gives me a surprise, I want to make it surprisinger, right? I want to make it even more surprising. So I thought that was nice. This is something that the bass trombone is going to do very easily and very well. Boom, boom, beam, beam, right? So imagine Nat playing this whenever you're playing, right? You know, um, just like that kind of sound, and that was great. Also, your octaves got a lot better when we gave it just a little more length. We can just get a hold of the note just a little bit better. Um, uh, can I hear the whole excerpt one more time? Yeah. Um, I think what I would love is to have the sort of like fatness that you're discovering on those quarter notes at the end to be mirrored maybe in the beginning as well. Deem, bum 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 bum, accented for sure. But in terms of the shape and the length, I would just love to hear those a little bit more, right? Um, I had a few Italian friends in the orchestra in Vienna that and they always said an Italian has never played anything short in their life. like, uh, everything is wet. Even short notes have these like this beautiful ring to it, which to me makes sense with their language because like almost all Italian words end in a vowel, right? Um, and so you have this tom, bum, 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 right? We never want to get into where it's one note at a time. That also has implications on the phrasing because this can be really easy to get very vertical in those measures. Bum, 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 instead of bum, 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 right? We're always leading to that top note of the arpeggio. Can we just do that with that in mind? Just a little fatter with a nice direction up to the top note. Yes, I love that. The only thing I would then add to that is because I love that length and I love that direction. Now let's bring back a little bit of the punch of the accents, right? So that's one of the big things is like I call it the holy grail of brass playing, where we can get clarity and punch also with length and ring. Typically we'll do one or the other. We'll go da 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 da, or we'll go pop 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 pop. And I think if we can do both, that's what we're aiming for. Dum 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 dum. Bum, 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 bum. Sorry for my singing. One more time, please. Yeah, yeah. You're closing in on it, and I think just figuring out exactly how you want those notes to be, how you want those to be attacked, right? My teacher always called it ping and ring, right? We want a nice clarity and just that little bit of brassiness at the beginning, but then still have that ring to it, you know. Well done. Thank you so much for playing. Is there anything you don't understand? Anything you want to? Any questions that you have about either of these excerpts?
No, I think thank you. I think I'm good. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Is it? Yeah. Yay. Is it Micah's turn?
Yes, Micah.
Hi, Micah.
Hello. Sorry, I've been having some technological difficulties. I don't know if my microphone is going to work. I don't think it will, but we'll do what we can.
I think I hear Megan's birds.
Yes, you do.
Beautiful.
I'm in the garden.
Yeah, it makes you feel like I'm in my garden too.
I managed to get my child to go and watch some TV for a bit, so luckily I'm not with her.
Excellent. All right, we're gonna smaller.
Yeah, that's right.
Great.
Can you hear?
Yeah. Sounds pretty good actually. thank you. Um, a lot of things are going well, really well in that. Before I launch in, you're listening on a or you're on a device, right? You're like on a tablet or a phone, right?
Phone right now, yeah.
Okay, that's okay. The settings that you have available to you are just not as much as on a computer. So I'm just not going to be able to hear the last part of your long notes, but that's okay. I'm hearing the first part. It's so funny because it's like you play a long note and you go ba ba, and it just takes it out because it thinks it's a like an airplane flying over or something. So it's okay. It's really okay. Um, but I'm hearing like 90% of what you're doing. Um, how long have you been working on this excerpt?
Uh, wow. I don't know.
I mean, it sounds like you know it really well. I just want to make sure you didn't like pick it up yesterday, right? Um, so I can expect a certain level of familiarity with it. That's a hard word for me to say. Um, what recordings are you listening to?
Um, I guess I've sort of done the whole list on brass excerpts.
Yeah.
That, yeah.
Okay.
Most recently, I was listening to the Royal Concertgebouw. I like that one. Yeah.
Jurgen, I'm guessing.
It was, I think it was Bart Clausen's.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Um, I would encourage you, now that you know the excerpt really well, I would encourage you to go listen around to a few different recordings, especially European recordings. Um, the Berlin recordings. I really like the Mahler, the Vienna recording with Boulez, with Ian playing the solo. They did that a few years before I got in the orchestra. Um, you have to understand. So maybe more than any other composer, you can't understand Mahler's music without understanding Mahler's biography, right? And the culture from which he came. There are some artworks that are somewhat separable from the culture that produced them, and some that just aren't, right? Um, can you understand the rock music of the 1960s and 70s without ever hearing of what the Vietnam War was? Like, you can't, like, it would make no sense to you, right? Um, you so learn as much as you can about Mahler. I'm curious, what do you think this excerpt is portraying, right? Like what kinds of feelings are we supposed to have, or what kinds of images are we supposed to have with this?
Well, I think in general, he experienced a lot of tragedy in his life, uh, and you hear that in his music. Um, and this symphony, I mean, it's huge, and it's 6 movements. It's very, I guess, feeling a lot of emotions.
Yeah. It's all over the place.
Right. Then the sun comes out, and I think there's a lot of different.
So this particular excerpt, where are we on the emotion spectrum here?
I think much of it is sort of stormy or anxious. Yeah.
Yeah, I would also suggest something like despair,
Right.
grief, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
Right at 13, we see langsam, schwer. Do you know what those mean?
Well, I'm not sure.
Yeah, langsam is slow, schwer, heavy, slow and heavy. And what's interesting, um, there are times Mahler was a conductor, right? In his day, he was known more as a conductor than as a composer, right? Very similar to probably Pierre Boulez, right? Like in our day, we know him much more as a conductor than a composer. But over the test of time, he will probably be known more as a composer. Um, but because I think he was a conductor, he was a micromanager. He tells you exactly what to do and when to do it. So you've really got to know all of these words in here, all the German words, especially in Mahler. You got to go through and translate all of them and write them in your music because they're really, really key to understanding playing this in an authentic and stylistic way. Um, I think these opening A naturals. This becomes a note that we keep coming back to. It's like an anchor note, right? First it's A, then it becomes E, and then we become then it all centers around D, and we're not sure if it's D major or D minor. We'll get to that point, but for this first part of the thing, it's A natural, which becomes like sort of the intoning note for this little chant that we're about to do. It's actually very liturgical feeling, this kind of, and I think it should feel that sort of free, almost like a chant would feel. So Mahler, you may or may not know this, but for those that don't know this, Mahler grew up in this town uh, in what is now Czechia, called Jilava, or that's the Czech name for it is Jilava. In German, it was called Iglau. So there's this whole region of the Czech Republic, what is now known as Czechia, where all these towns have two different names, like they have the Czech name and the German name. Um, and this city was a really important crossroads and military post between Vienna and Prague. And so, and Mahler's family owned this tavern, and they ran this tavern. Owning and running a tavern was one of the few things that the government at the time would allow Jews to do. And because Mahler's family was Jewish, that was one of the few things that was one of the few occupations they were allowed to have, even, which seems crazy to us now. And so he had this tavern. He was surrounded by tragedy, as you said, lost several of his siblings. Um, uh, only he and a couple of his siblings even survived out of childhood. So he was constantly going to people's funerals. He was. Everybody says he was totally obsessed with the idea of death, and also, this was an era where most people, by our standards, were surrounded by death. Don't mean to get really dark and negative, but you got to understand it to understand this excerpt, right? We live in a time, of course, we live in the age of coronavirus, so we are seeing a lot of people obviously tragically dying right now. But aside from when we're going through a pandemic, typically, we live in the age of penicillin. So if you get a cold or something like that, most likely you're going to survive that. Mahler lived in the time before penicillin existed, and so it seems again weird to us now. But I mean, if you got a fever, if you came down with a cough, if you had a case of bronchitis, pneumonia, I mean that could kill you. You could get a fever and die next week. And so it's a level of tragedy and loss that we are just not accustomed to. And so this is one of those excerpts that is technically challenging, and it has some technically challenging things in it, but it's going to be emotionally challenging if you're going to really go there emotionally. Because in order to play this really well and understand it, you have to get inside that emotion of loss, right? The whole thing is a funeral march. That's what we're playing at this point. Now, here in just a few minutes, we're going to be playing "Be Our Guest" from Beauty and the Beast, right? Dee da da, dee da dee, right? And the suns come out, and that's the dual nature of this piece. But right now, it's a funeral march. It's imagine the TV stereotypical funeral march. It's pouring rain. Everybody's wearing black. We're walking with a casket from the church or the synagogue out to the burial path, right? Not a happy thing. And these A naturals, there under your part it says "Bei den gehaltenen Tonen schalte in die Höhe." Do you know what that means? Does it say that in your edition, by the way?
No.
Yeah. "Bei den gehaltenen Tönen schalte in die Höhe." That means during the long notes, hold your bell up. Yep. Um, he wants us to hear this sound like it's coming right from the inside of your bell, and it has to be blood curdling, right? We're not talking about just um, volume here. We're talking about the shape of the note. We're talking about the tone of the note, right? Uh, it can't be da, right? This is not like, right? It has to be oh from the depths of your soul, right? I don't mean to be melodramatic, but like that's kind of what this excerpt needs, right? From the tips of your toes, this A has to be your soul pouring out the bell. And then you got to do another one. And then we elaborate on it a little bit. Da, 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 ba, da. That B flat is the pain note because we've just established we're going to go A, and we think we're going to go da, da, dee, dee, da, da. But that B flat is the knife turning. Da, da, dee, da, da, ba, dee. That pain has got to come through the bell. Can we just try it?
Yes.
I know I've set a big task for you, but I know you can do this. I know you can do this. Yes. Yeah. So it's really important. He says sempre fortissimo, what you're doing. He says triolen nicht schleppen. Do you know what that means?
Don't slow down.
Don't yeah, don't rush the triplets. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Dom dom deem dom dom dom, right? Or basically most people what they end up doing is they'll hang out a little bit on the first couple triplets because triplets are traditionally a very round sort of rhythm. Da dom dee da da dee da. We want to feel the weight of those, right? Later, he wants us to go forwards, and he'll say vorwärts, go forward. Right here, right, dom dom deem dom dom dee, right. Each of those triplets leads us towards that pain note. Can we try that one more time? Good. Yeah, there we go. There we go. And I just realized I think the wrong thing came out of my mouth. Triola nicht schleppen means don't drag the triplets. I think I said don't rush, but don't drag the triplets. Boom, boom, beam, boom, boom. Because I just realized, like, I think I said don't drag, but then sang it as them going forward. What I mean to say, yeah, they should go forward. This is what happens when you're not very smart like I am and you learn a second language and then it just pushes all the English out of your head. Yeah, don't drag the triplets. So start heavy, but then let them run towards that pain note, which you did beautifully there. Then at 14, what I really love is I love how you're letting it move forward, right? Because he says all in one measure of space. He goes vorwärts, which means forwards, etwas drängend, somewhat urgently, and nicht zurückhalten, don't hold back, right? So it's like this music is supposed to tumble forward, which you did. What I wasn't crazy about is we went kind of short on the triplets. So typically, I could do another lecture on why this is this way, but the tradition is that the eighth notes would be lifted in this excerpt, but that the quarter notes and the quarter note triplets would be quite long, right? Um, many rhythms have a context and a history, right? And triplets are traditionally a very round rhythm where that would be quite long, unless they're eighth note or 16th note, and then they're fanfare da 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 dum, right? But this is like beep ba 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 bom dee dee dom dee dee bom bom, right? The notes would be tenuto in that they would touch each other, but still very clear, especially where you see the accents, right? Another way that people have interpreted this is basically um, from 14, all of these notes are pretty tenuto except the eighth notes, and that the accents, what those really are doing is um, like Ian Bousfield treats those as stretch marks. He calls them stretch marks. Basically, he will stretch and get as much juice as he can out of all the accented notes. So you get da ba 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 bom dee dee dom dee dee bom bom, right? Things like that. So this is where we start to go towards the direction of, is it major or is it minor, right? Which Mahler loves to do. He'll put major and minor right next to each other. You know, da da dee da da dee 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 da 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 da, things like that. So here we go. Ya ba ba bum bum dee dee dum dee dee da dee bum. We think we might be even going to D major. Boom bum, and that F minor reminds us that nope, this is the sad part of the symphony, right? Um, so can we do 14 and just a little bit more singing through the quarter notes and the quarter note triplets, but still lifted as you were doing on the eighth notes? Yeah, nicely done. I think what we're getting here at 14, as it tumbles forward and it gets more rhythmically agitated, we're starting to introduce into our despair and grief, perhaps, tell me if you think I'm wrong, but perhaps a bit of anger, right? This is when we start to a little bit, through the stages of grief, we start to shake our fist at the sky a little bit, like, why? You know? Um, but we don't go all the way with it. We come back to the despair and we stay there for a little bit, and then of course at 16 it just explodes, right? We just can't hold it back any longer. So this is why he says at 15, this is why the translation is so important: wieder schwer, heavy again, right? Which then implies that it's been less heavy leading up to that. And sure enough, we look back and we see moving forward, heavy again, ball, ball, back into the pits of despair. Bom, bom, ba 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 da, pain note. Then we lead to an even more painful note. Ba 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 da da body. Right? Goodness, it's bone chilling, right? Let's hear it at 15, please. Sorry if my singing is loud and crass. Yeah, good. Remember, triplets are long. Ba 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 ba. Even I love the articulation that you're getting. We just need them to be still triplety, or quarter note triplety. Let's just start on that phrase there at the end of the line. Bom bom. Pita, da, 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 pita. Yeah, yeah. I like your timing on everything. I want to unpack the last few measures with you, but they're at 16, etwas drängend. You're doing a good job there. I like how you're getting into wild, which is not too hard to figure out, means wild, right? Um, I'm not super convinced about your pitch there. Dum, dee da da dum, dee da da dum, dee da da da. I'm not sure that we're getting out to quite a C sharp there. So watch that. When we get to that forte piano there, I know it can seem really weird and awkward to do a forte piano there, but it's a color thing that Mahler wants, right? So we go bum da 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 dum da 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 ba ba ba, and it feels weird to come back only to crescendo again. But I think it's what Mahler wants, and it's at least the tradition that happens. And again, we go back to those nice long triplets. Um, that's my only critique of the last few measures. When we get, he said accelerando forwards, accelerando forwards. I think he wants us to move forwards, and you are moving forwards really well. But we're getting just a little bit short with the notes, and so it sounds a little. It doesn't have the drama that it needs, right? Because we're getting this bit right. It sounds like Mighty Mouse is on the way, and we need like you know the Avengers, right? More meat to the notes if you can there. Let's just start. Actually, yeah, I want to hear you play 16 again because it was so good. Yeah, yeah, nicely done. I think you could practice that. One of the hardest things for me to practice ever is like very loud, but also very legato. Right? That's kind of hard to do. La, da, 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 right? I think you could stand to practice that a little bit just to get some of that, the meat on the bones of those notes, and then come back and put in the punch, so that we're not getting beep, bop, bop, beep, bop. And of course, I think you're in a little bit of a dry room and stuff, but just be aware of that. And then, yeah, there at the end, we actually think he's going to go into D major, right? Bim bum dum dim bum da ba da bum ba bim ba bi ba ba bi ba bum bim bum bum bum, right? And that F is just like a punch in the face, And so, and he says pesante, heavy, bum bum bim bum. And if you ever really think about what heavy versus light is, often we think of them as articulations or we think of them as volume levels. But really, what heavy and light is backside of the beat or front side of the beat. It's music that wants to stay and pull back, or music that wants to move forward, right? And so the moment he says pesante, what he means is slam on the brakes. We're slowing down. Bim ba dim da, that music wants to go. Yum da dim da ya da da di da dum dim bum bum bum. Really late, and hit us in the face with it, and that's going to be it's going to be fantastic. You've got a wonderful start on this excerpt. As you can tell, there's a lot of details, right, to really pulling this off. And also, uh, this is where I talk to a lot of young people about being a good actor. Because when I was your age, I can't even believe I said that phrase, but when I was your age, I had not experienced tragedy. I had not really experienced loss in my life. I now have. But at that time, what I had to learn to do is be a really good actor, right? And you personally may have experienced great loss in your life, and if you have, then use that, leverage it, go to that place, as painful as it might be. Use that experience to inhabit the character that Mahler's trying to do here. And if you haven't, thank goodness, then imagine what it would be like, right? Get as close to it as you can in terms of going to that place emotionally. Um, I was watching. I'm not an award show watcher, but I happened to be I come across the Golden Globe Awards. This was a few months back, and Tom Hanks was given some sort of lifetime achievement award. And he said the most impactful thing that he was ever taught during his little acceptance speech. He said, when I was growing up and I went to my first summer camp where it was like an acting camp, and they would put on a whole play. He said the director said, essentially, as an actor, you have three jobs: learn your lines and show up on time. Um, hit your mark and come up with a tons of ideas for the character. And number three is you have to go to that place emotionally, whatever that character is doing. And I thought there's so much carryover between what they do and what we do, because every time you pick up a piece of music, you're inhabiting a character. Now, sometimes that character is somewhat shallow, so to speak, right? Really, it's just like play something pretty, right? Music before Beethoven wasn't really even about things, right? Um, and then Beethoven comes along and says music can be about things. Music can actually be autobiographical. And then, of course, Berlioz comes along and says, actually, your music can tell a story. Um, and people really ran with that. And of course, Richard Wagner said, yeah, your music can really tell a story. And then Mahler said, not only can music tell a story, it can tell my story. And so, in order to really get inside that music and know what you're trying to communicate, you have to know that story and then be willing to go to that place. Technically speaking, there's very little holding you back in this. It's really just a matter of like making sure that you're consistent with those details and that you keep me as your audience member riveted from the first note you play to the last note you play, right? If at any point, especially in a long excerpt like this, if at any point you lose me, then it's really hard to get me back, right? Jurgen von Rien said it's like having a dog on a leash. It's like if you let him go, you got to like chase him down, right? Um, and so like really fascinate me, make fascinating sound from the very first note. Um, I want to make sure that we keep time for some questions, Megan. Um, did you
Absolutely.
did you have another excerpt you wanted to play, Micah?
Yeah, I was gonna play Berlioz' Fantastique.
Yeah, cool. That we shouldn't need a ton of time to talk about that. So let's hear that and work through that, and then I'd love to do some Q&A if that's okay.
Perfect.
If there are any Q's, I will have A's. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Um, I think you've got a lot of the main structure is there. I have a couple little things just right there at the end. I'm not convinced about your intonation of F, G flat, A flat, bum, ba, ba, bum, ba, ba, bum. I'm not singing that correctly, but just watch out for that. Do you want to play that and check in with that? Maybe just dum da dum da da dum. I was singing starting on this. It doesn't sound like yeah. Make sure that we're getting. The hard part is that up until you get to the A flat, all those are adjusted positions, right? E flat, F, G, A flat. Or sorry, dum, dee, da, dum, bum. Yeah, the F, and the G flat. I'm just not totally convinced pitch wise. Just check in with that. Um, I like your clarity. I really like your clarity on your eighth notes. It feels very vertical, and they do need to be quite lifted. But it feels a little bit like bum, dee da dum da da dum, right? I don't feel the momentum going across the bar. I really need to feel that dum, dee da dum da da dum, dee da dum da da dum, like so that it's going across to the downbeat. Because again, it's a funeral march of a different kind, right? It's a death march. Um, you really gravitated to those today, didn't you? It's okay. um, so let's try it from the beginning with that, and then when we get into the difficult lick, um, uh, the real crux of that is ba dee dee ba ba bom be bom be, that fifth there, bom dee da 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 dom dee. Those intervals there is where you went off the rails. So that may be what you need to practice a little bit more, or maybe you just need to follow through with the sound of the lower note more, right? Very often people will go da dee da 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 be da 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 but right, and we don't follow through with that low note, but then your ear can't tell what the next note's supposed to be. We can't hear the interval, right? Ba, right, be da 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 be da 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 dee da, right? Make sure that you follow through with the note. Let's try it from the beginning once more. Yeah, there's something about that F or the F or the G flat. I'm not sure which, but so much better in the middle part of that, right? I mean, everybody concentrates on the high note, right? And we forget that we need the bottom part of the interval for our ears to be able to hear the leap up, right? D da 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 dee da 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 dee da, right? That went much better, I thought. Did you think?
Yes, yes, it was better.
Much better. Good. Thank you for leading those eighth notes across the bar line. Yeah, that one is probably 93% of the way there. Okay, good. Thank you so much, Micah. Yeah, cool. Yeah, just any questions that anybody has about anything, I'd be happy to answer.
If everyone who's been watching and not playing, if you guys want to turn your cameras on, and then we can all see your beautiful faces. I really was glad that you did so much singing, to be honest, because I had a teacher who told me how important that was for phrasing.
Yes.
You tend to phrase naturally with your voice,
Yeah.
and it's much easier to then imitate that, right? I think you have a lovely singing voice.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
You have to open our video, Megan, just so you know.
I do? Oh, gosh. I have all this power.
Yeah, I tell all my students that come to study with me, or potential students, I tell them if you aren't okay with me singing, then you shouldn't come here, because I'm not a singer, but I sing so much in lessons. I operate on that when you sing, there are the fewest amount of barriers between your concept and reality. And so I'm not even that concerned about pitch accuracy, although I would love to sing more on pitch. It's more about phrasing and different things like that, because there are so many things. We've been vocalizing since we were born, and most of us have not been playing our instruments for that long. We're just way more practiced at it, um, and uh, and of course we vocalize all day long, every day for our whole lives, especially people who blab a lot like me. So there's just not so many barriers.
Yeah, it's true. I'm a violinist, so there's even more barriers, right? I'm not using it.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. Yeah.
So
Okay.
I've always been envious of you guys. Does anybody want to ask anything to Jeremy?
I don't have a question about any of the excerpts we worked on, but I loved a lot of what you had to say. It was really great. I just want to say thank you. It was very helpful.
It was
Thank you.
fantastic.
Thanks for having me. It's been great to be here.
I do have one question.
Okay.
Why would you leave a job with the Vienna Phil?
Yeah, I left the Vienna Phil to pursue my dream job.
Teaching?
Yeah. I always wanted to be a teacher growing up. And throughout high school and the first half of college, I thought I was going to be a high school band director. Uh,
Wow,
about
that's a big
halfway
leap.
Yeah, I never considered being in an orchestra. It was about halfway through college that my playing started to get good, and I started to think, okay, I do really like performing, and I really want performing to be a big part of my life. That was also about the time I started to get some private students to earn some extra money, and I found that I actually quite enjoyed teaching one on one, even more than I enjoyed being on a podium in front of a group of orchestra or band kids. And so I talked to my teacher. I said, "Is there a job where I could perform a lot and be expected to be a really high quality player, but be able to teach one on one?" He's like, "Well, yeah, you could be a college trombone teacher." I was like, "That's what I want to do then." And so I entered grad school with that in mind. I was my whole time I wanted to do what I'm doing now. I filled out a goals sheet with in my first lesson of my master's degree on September 1st, 2006, and my top two goals, my 10-year professional goal was to uh, teach at a university, and my personal goal was to live as close to Tennessee as possible because I come from here. And as it turns out, I teach at a university in Tennessee, about an hour.
Nailed it.
Yeah. So,
But that's probably
but,
why you won the job.
well, the way I got there was just definitely not what I had planned because I didn't expect to do any orchestra playing really. Um, and like my whole life had been band music, jazz, chamber music, solo playing, and teaching. I had done very little orchestra stuff. And my teacher said, if you become a college trombone teacher, some of the students that you're going to teach are going to want to be in an orchestra, even if you don't. And so you should take some auditions to, prepare for that process and know how to teach them and, learn all the excerpts. And so we actually put it on my goals sheet for that semester that I was going to take some auditions. And as it turned out, the audition that I took was for the Vienna Philharmonic. It was the first audition I'd ever had, and it was probably good for me that I didn't realize what I was getting into.
That's what I was
And
gonna say. That's probably why you won. Like
I think
you
so. I
didn't
think
care. It was
yeah,
yeah.
I had nothing to lose really. I did go through a bit of a mental, it was a big journey because initially when I got the opportunity to audition, I go, I don't really want that. Um, I just want to be a teacher. I'm not interested in being an orchestra. Am I going to move to Europe? I mean, come on. And so I didn't really prepare well because I wasn't really committed. I didn't really want to win. But then about 3 or 4 weeks into it, it kind of completely flip flopped where I go, oh my God, I'm never going to get a chance like this ever again. I have to win this job. And that was equally toxic because then I was putting all this pressure on myself. And my teacher, Jan, said, look, Jeremy, you have a win win situation here because if you go and you win this job, I think she inserted an expletive there. If you go and win this job, then oh my goodness, how amazing is that? If you don't, then look what you've learned and look at the experience you've gotten. And so I did. I was able to go into the audition with truly nothing to lose. I was just so happy to be there.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to make music. And I just, and interestingly, in the second round of the audition, there was an excerpt from Also sprach Zarathustra that goes up to a very high note for the trombone, and I just totally messed it up. I mean, like it sounded like a Tarzan yell. It was like ha ha ha. I didn't get any note that was anywhere near a high D, and I thought, okay, the audition's over. Like I've clearly lost the job now. But they let me keep playing down the list, and the next thing on the list was that Mahler 3 excerpt that Micah was playing. And afterwards, everybody said it was that excerpt that won the job for me because I was at that point I was just like, screw it. I'm just going to play my heart out, and and but that was the one that they go, whoa, because I really didn't have anything to lose. So but of course I was thrilled that I got the job in the orchestra. When I first got the job, I really thought I was probably going to that's going to be my career. Now I'm going to be here for 30 years. I was hoping that I would maybe be able to get a teaching position at one of the universities there in Vienna. But as some of you may know, the Philharmonic is also the Vienna State Opera Orchestra. So you have two jobs in one. And my job was a Wechselposaune position, which means I was playing second trombone mostly, but principal trombone when needed. So I kind of had four jobs in one. I was second trombone and first trombone in the State Opera and in the Philharmonic, and it's just a lot of work. I mean, they work more than any other orchestra in the world. They tour constantly because that's where a lot of the big money comes from. They have no corporate sponsors or anything like that. It's just like, that's where they get the money. And so 16, 17, 18 services a week was very common. Um, Typically three services a day. And even though I was there from age 25 to 29, I felt like I was much older, and people burn out hardcore in that orchestra. And also it became really clear, because there was so much work, and because I'm not Austrian, getting a job at one of the universities and having a little studio of my own and getting to scratch that teaching itch was never going to happen, ever. And so at one point I thought, if I can make it 10 years, that'll be great. It's a nice round number. I'll be 35 and I've had a 10-year career in the Vienna Philharmonic. But then this job at Vanderbilt came open, and it was a total building kind of thing. The studio was quite poor up to that point. They had not really invested in their winds and percussion, but they wanted to change that, and so they had a bunch of big searches and hires. And I thought, I can come back and build something that I'm passionate about and live an hour down the road from my family. And it was hard to give up. It really was hard, the performance aspect of it. But now I've been able to build my own platform, and I have that amazing experience nobody can take from me. Got to see the world. All these flags back here were all the countries that I visited with the orchestra, 48 different countries, including Canada. Um, and got to play with, Boulez and Mazel and all these people, some of which are gone now. But now I've been back for 8 years, and I really feel like this is my dream job. Actually, this is the job I was kind of wired to do in the first place. I could have stayed there and done that for a while longer, of course, but I'm really, really loving this.
I don't know. I think there's something to be said for leaving on a good note, you know?
Yeah,
You were
for
still
sure.
loving it, but it was a good opportunity, and now you have good memories,
Absolutely.
you
Yeah,
know?
I'm glad I left before I burned out.
Yeah.
My wife is also profoundly deaf. She has an 80% hearing loss and uses hearing aids and lip reading
Right.
in English, of course. So learning German was really hard for her. She can't hear consonants, and German is almost always consonants. And so she was quite isolated, and I'm like off or going around the world all the time. She's at home with our son and has no friends and can't speak to anybody. It was really hard from a family aspect too. So that also made it really kind of unsustainable.
Yeah, for sure.
I thought, I didn't think she was going to leave me or something like that, but I thought, this is not, it was changing her. It
Yeah,
was
and
really
that's not fair, right? You have to meet your partner halfway for sure.
exactly. And when we were in Texas and I was in grad school and I said, we're moving to Vienna, I got this job. She's like, okay. She never spoke, I mean, and so it's like, but she was deeply unhappy there. And in retrospect, I mean, I really enjoyed my job and loved it. But I tell my students, enjoying your job, being really good at your job, and being fulfilled by your job are not always the same thing. We certainly hope that they are, but they're not always the same thing. And I enjoyed it. I was good at it. But I really, once I got back here and then really built this studio, now I realize in retrospect, I think I was deeply unsatisfied
Mm.
there as well. Um, so, which is again not indicative of all orchestras. That's a very unique orchestra in the pressures and the amount of work that they do. Um, and yeah, it was a wonderful part of my life, but one that I'm not, I don't have really regrets, I have to say.
You don't miss it.
I miss the music.
Yeah.
I miss the music.
But not 3 services a day and
Not 3 services a
a
day,
lot.
and and I miss a lot of the operas too. But
Yeah.
every time I go back and visit, and I have dinner with the colleagues and stuff, and and I'm like, oh, so what's on the program tonight? They're like, another Tosca, and that was the thing that I noticed when I was there is I knew something was wrong when I was sitting in this amazing orchestra, and all I can think about is like, when are we
Yeah.
done?
Another Tosca. That kind of
Yeah,
says it all, doesn't it?
yeah, and it's like I don't want to feel this way about this music and this orchestra, and so it really showed me like maybe this isn't where you are meant to be,
Mm-hmm.
and but now I have that orchestra experience, and I can share that and guide people, and and I get to work with people and teach, which is really what I love to do.
It's amazing. What a life. Does anyone else want to say anything? I'm just monopolizing
Uh,
the one non-brass.
is it Michael? I
Yeah,
thought you said
Michael?
I saw your hand. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna ask you, so about the thing you were saying about to and do articulations and stuff.
Yeah.
Obviously there's a place for both, but was the point you were making that as North Americans we're a bit less conscious of when we switch?
Exactly, precisely. There's absolutely a place for both, but in a place like that, like the Wagner excerpt or the Mahler excerpt that I was talking about, there's no musical reason to substitute D for T. We're just doing it because, you know, basically we're changing the music subconsciously to fit what's comfortable to us, and that's not what I want to do. I want to change my playing to fit the music, not the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Good question. That's a great question because I didn't want to be misunderstood on that. Mark.
Yeah, hi, Jeremy. Thanks for doing this, by the way. Again, really appreciate it. I'm another one of the horn players. This is sorry, Megan. We're getting into shop talk here now. I'm curious what you think of. Well, I'll rephrase that. The Vienna Philharmonic has like such a unique sounding brass section, and one of the unique sounds in the world, I think, for that. And I wonder, as a horn player, I'm going to monopolize for a second, I guess, and ask what you think of you being from the Midwest or the Mid South versus the Vienna horn sound, I guess.
I gotta say, I'm addicted to the Wiener horn, man.
Yeah.
Hard for me to hear Mahler, Strauss, Beethoven. I mean, anybody whose last name sounds like a schnitzel or a sausage, like it's hard for me to hear that music without the Wiener horn. I just love the sound that it has. What was really weird for me was just before I left, they did one of their big outdoor concerts where it's like a free concert and like 120,000 people show up. They did it on the theme of sun, moon, and stars. They did the Jupiter Symphony, and they did the planets, and they did the Star Wars suite. And hearing those Wiener horns go dum ba da da bum, I was like, whoa, it's and they're so squirrely. And I've seen those horn players, many of which did grow up playing Wiener horn if they grew up in Vienna or whatever, but some didn't. We had a couple Germans that grew up playing, the double horn, and I would see them after a concert, where I just remember this Beethoven 7 we played where the poor lead horn player, he just could not hit the right note to save his life. And he was just having a bad day. And he walked out and he was like, verdammte Wiener horn. He wanted to just throw it against the ground, And they are really squirrely. But
I actually, that's one thing I've listening to your particularly live performances from Vienna Phil, it's like nobody cares about missed notes though, which I think is phenomenal because I think in North America particularly we're so focused on like, is everything perfect? And I always appreciate listening to Vienna recordings for that because nobody cares if you miss a note.
I don't know if I would say nobody cares.
Well, yeah, consistently anyway.
The music is king, and that was the big thing that I learned there, is that the music, whatever the music needs, I have to turn off my ego, and I have to turn off even my sort of like safety nets. The beginning of the Wagner opera Parsifal, begins like with these. I mean, it's incredibly quiet, and then yeah, they're awesome. Yeah, that's wonderful. We totally planned that.
Yeah, we did it hilariously.
Trumpet. There's a trumpet solo that starts in the low range and then comes up, so softly, and it comes up into the high range. And in one of the rehearsals, I was like, "Why are you playing that so softly? Aren't you afraid you're gonna blank out?" And he said, "Yeah, man, it's terrifying. I'm so afraid I'm gonna miss every single note. But I mean, Herr Wagner wrote triple piano. What am I supposed to do? You know, it's like the music needs this. I have to do that, even if it means I have to risk sounding bad, you know. And definitely the culture here in many places, I can't say it's universal, but in many places is, you know, do whatever's the safest,
Yeah.
and which I understand. I mean, there are ups and downs to both sides, right? But I would definitely say that the culture there is if you're going after the music and something goes wrong for you, nobody will nobody will bat an eye, you know, if you're going after the music. If it happens every single performance, okay, we're going to need to talk, right? But Wolfgang Tumbuk is just one of my very favorite horn players of all time, and just I could listen to him play the last page of Ein Heldenleben for the rest of my life on the Wiener horn because just the legato that it gets and just the sound is just beautiful. So yeah, I could talk about Wiener horn all night. What else can I answer?
Come on, guys. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity. Okay, Jay, my tuba player.
Yay! Hey, nobody's perfect. It's okay.
Yeah, okay. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, great. So I was just wondering, in your time in Vienna, did you have opportunity to be on an audition panel?
I did, yeah.
And then what were sort of the differences between North America and Vienna specifically, maybe, that you were?
Yeah, for sure. I have to be somewhat anecdotal about this just because I've never been in a North American orchestra or never been on a panel in a North American orchestra. But from what I have heard from colleagues, one of the big differences that we had in Vienna was the size of the jury and the inclusiveness of the jury, because when you go and audition for the Staatsoper there, there's a principal player from every section, plus all the principals from the entire brass, and then the entire section for whatever section you're playing for. So when I was there were 28 members on the jury, and then the conductor was there. Seiji Ozawa at the time was the music director of the Staatsoper. So and he got an equal vote. I mean, there's no weighting of the votes or anything. They just add those together and average them. So that was one thing. The other thing is very similar to what I was saying before about that music and being willing to take risks for the sake of the music, doing something special. That obviously they're very, very protective of the specialness of their music there. And for years and years and years, they thought that the specialness of their music came from being a white male European orchestra. And of course, that idea is now leaving, thankfully, that it's not about who's playing the music, but what the music sounds like. That they're very protective of the uniqueness and the willingness to take risks for the sake of the music. So, speaking to a tuba player, I will tell you that the first audition that I was on the panel for was for the job that Christoph Giegler eventually won, and he won the audition. I mean, I hate to simplify it this much, but in many ways, he won that audition on his first note because he came in. We could hear him from behind the curtain, getting his chair sorted and, emptying his water and all that kind of stuff, making his little nest. And the first excerpt up was a Siegfried excerpt. This, and he started out like when we could hear him, get ready to play, and we could hear him breathe. He went. It was so quiet, and everybody around, you could just hear this sound because everybody just dropped their pencils, and it's like audition's over. I mean, and he played the rest of the excerpt beautifully. But the fact that he was willing to come into that room and from the very first note, I mean, he had to play many other rounds and show that he could play, right? But in many ways, he had decided he was the only person they forwarded to the next round because he was the only person who took the risk to play that song. And of course, that could have been disastrous. He could have blanked out, you know. But he was able to pull it off, and he was 19 at the time. Yeah, that's another thing is they're willing to take young people. In fact, they quite like taking young people. There was a time that you couldn't audition for the Vienna Philharmonic if you were over 35. They've now since dropped that, but they want to get you young and cultivate you and have you be there a while. So I obviously didn't work out well in that, but I was 24 when I got the job, 25 when I started, and uh, so that's one difference. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's it. Mainly, also just the clarity. That clarity is really really important to them, and style is really important. Um, if you have any excerpt creep, so what I mean by that is, if you're playing Ride of the Valkyries, and then the next excerpt sounds a little bit like Ride of the Valkyries, that's not a good thing. They want you to completely be able to shift characters. Also, for that job, it's really important because there's this one day that I think of that's we would have these little epic days where in the morning I was doing a rehearsal for Aida with Zubin Mehta, and then in the afternoon we had a Philharmonic performance of the Verdi Requiem with Riccardo Muti, and then that night we had Parsifal with Christian Thielemann. And in that day, I had to go from Aida to Verdi to Wagner, and you've got to be able to switch quickly. So they want to see you be able to do that well. Yeah, those are the first things that come to mind.
I find North American auditions, everybody sounds the same.
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah,
I never really got into doing a lot of the auditions because I didn't want to play in an orchestra that stifled you. So
yeah,
I prefer, chamber and stuff. And like
yeah.
with Boris, he'd rather meet the person and talk to the person and, hey, we're a
Okay,
good match, right? So let's
yeah,
do it.
yeah,
Yeah. Natalie?
yeah.
Yeah, similar to what you were saying to Jay's question. It's a pretty broad question, but do you have any advice for like somebody who is planning to start actually taking auditions besides, like timing and tone and tuning and stuff, the basics?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you got to sound good. You got to be able to play in time and tune, but you're not going to even be out on the audition circuit if those prerequisites aren't anywhere close to being met, right? You're not going to kid yourself. And everybody that I've heard today has all those things or is well on their way to having those things really consistently. So that's, yeah, okay. Beyond that, I think um, for me, if I were out on the trail again doing it, or the way I advise my students is, um, offer something special and then find the place where that thing fits. Um, what I don't like about the North American way of doing things is it feels so much like a crapshoot so many of the times. Like you just have to guess what that orchestra wants to hear.
Mm.
Whereas in Vienna, like there were 19 people in the finals, and 18 of them had been coached by members of the section. They over there, they feel like if I can tell you what we want and you're able to do that, then great. They don't consider it like cheating or getting unfair help. Um, and so I was coached by two members of the section, because they feel like we want you to be able to do it this way. So that can be frustrating. So here, what I would do is obviously have something that you offer, bring something special to the table that that you can do better than anybody else. Nobody else is going to be able to walk into that room and do this thing as well as you can do, and find ways to offer that. Of course, be flexible, be adaptable, on things that are sort of like these open-fisted things. I mean, there are some things we hold near and dear, like I will not compromise on this. But if they want it a little faster, a little slower, or whatever, okay, great. Because you do want to be adaptable, in any situation. But that would be my main thing is, most of my advice is going to be mental and emotional about learning to relax and focus and have fun. That's the part that is probably the most missing in most of the students that I work with. They sound great and they're really focused and they know the pieces, they know all that they need to know, but you don't hear passion in the music. You don't hear that character. And that's the thing, that's going to separate you from everybody else. Whenever I started grad school, what initially got me the opportunity to audition for the Vienna Philharmonic is the principal trombonist heard a recording that I had made for a separate competition, for a solo competition, and he thought I was musical. He didn't hear me playing orchestral things. He thought I was a musical person, um, and like, you should audition for the VF Philharmonic because we like to hear a musician. And my teacher said, if you play that way, you'll walk past the competition because everybody's going this way. Everybody's going towards don't miss notes. You know, we're playing to not miss notes or not make a mistake rather than playing for connecting with another human being. You know, the way I say it in one of my videos is, if you can impress the panel, that's great. That's a great start. But if you can make them cry or make them laugh or right, if you can touch their humanness, that really gives you a chance to win. Now, if they just think your sound doesn't fit or whatever, okay, fine. But I want, maybe it sounds cheesy, or idealistic, but when somebody hears me play, whether they like what I did or not, I want them to be moved by it in some way, because that really, to me, that's what differentiates us from my iPad, right? Because, like, at some point, and it may already be here, I just don't know, but at some point, AI technology is going to be good enough that, they could sample in like your sound and then plug in the Hungarian march and make the computer sound like you would sound. And so, an iPad can maybe recreate the sound waves that are coming out of your trombone, but what they can never recreate is your humanity. My iPad will never know what it's like to hold my newborn baby daughter or to see my best friend die of cancer, right? Like, those are things that only I as a human can have. And so to me, that's what I want to aim for. And it seems so antithetical sometimes to say I'm going to do that in excerpts, because excerpts seem so cut and dry. Just don't miss, you know. And of course there's a limit to how many things you can miss, right? You need to be a consistent player. I don't want to sit next to somebody who doesn't sound good or play in tune or is going to change their articulation every time they play something. But I also don't want to sit next to somebody that's going to just be a robot, you know. So that's my main advice, I think.
Right, thank you.
Alenka?
You're very welcome. Okay. Well, thank you, Megan, for inviting me to do this. Thank you all for, being great, participants and everything. I love talking about music. I could do this for another few hours, but my wife wants to have supper, so
The one good thing that's come out of this whole global situation we're in is that we can now take advantage of people like you who are willing to do this sort of stuff online. So I really can't thank you enough. This was my first online masterclass that I.
Oh wow!
Yeah, you were my first.
Yay!
So, it went really well, and I'm really pleased that for the most part the quality worked out.
Yeah.
And, I think we're gonna be okay for the next 5 weeks, guys.
Yeah. The good thing is I've done a few of these, and the very first one that I did, about half the participants didn't have good internet connections.
Yeah.
And so, like, you were only hearing about every fourth note they were playing. Yeah. So this
We
really well.
sent a list of requirements, and gave them tips on how to improve their Wi-Fi and stuff before the festival started. So we had a bit of time to, work out the kinks. So
Yeah, great. Well, it's working great.
Well, thank you again.
Congratulations to all of you, and I hope our paths cross again in the future.
Well, I'm definitely gonna do this again next year, whether we're back up and running or not.
Excellent.
It's a nice way to meet other
where
people.
Typically, if you're in person, where would you typically be?
So our festival is run out of Hamilton, Ontario.
Okay, yeah.
Which is about 20 to 40 minutes, depending on traffic, from Toronto.
Toronto, yeah.
So not a likely place to have a music festival. It's a steel town.
Yeah.
But, we happen to have a phenomenal conductor that lives here and put this program together over 30 years ago. And well, we always say we're like a mini New World.
I was checking out the site, and it looks like it's very similarly kind of.
Yeah, we kind of wanted to. I mean, I started as an apprentice. I was a violinist in the orchestra, and the first thing I played was Beethoven 7, and Boris and I were like, boom! It was like fireworks.
That's so cool.
So, and I gradually, they needed a librarian, and then they needed a manager. So.
Wonderful.
Yeah, this has been really great, Jeremy.
Same here. I've enjoyed every minute of it.
Perfect.
I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.